Excited for the opportunity to talk about our work here today, and a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of RBC. This is RBC Grounds, so welcome here. I hope you're having a terrific Monday morning here at TMLS, celebrating Canadian AI innovation. So before we begin, I would like to tell you a bit about us and a bit about RBC. So John and I, we help organizations innovate their products and services using emerging AI technologies, and we do it by bringing interesting business problems to the lab space. We have been doing this work for a number of years. As when we were introduced, we are the team that helped RBC get started on anything related with generative AI and, of course, the next generation of large language models. At RBC, I want to tell you a bit about us for people that haven't heard what RBC is. So we are Canada's largest bank and one of the largest in the world based on market capitalization. Our size and scale enables us to build innovation and build leading-edge solutions to deliver broad and meaningful experiences to our clients. We are also working on a number of areas of focus. People may be familiar with Borealis AI. There are other departments within our technology and operations organization, starting with digital technology, innovation and technology, global cybersecurity, global functions, quantitative technology capital service, also known as capital markets technology solutions, retail banking, technology infrastructure, and all that have to do with the transformation and enterprise operations. At RBC, we believe artificial intelligence is one of the most transformative technologies we have seen, and that will impact the world today and also has the potential to change how we interact with our technology and enable us to do things in a different scale. In 2023, RBC was ranked third overall and first nationally at incorporating and advancing artificial intelligence among North America, European, and Asian Pacific banks according to the Evident AI Index. This index was published by Evident Insights. It's an intelligent platform developing a standard benchmark for AI maturity across a variety of sectors, but primarily for financial sectors. The ranking was based on 4 main categories: talent, innovation, leadership, and trust. We are always looking out for talent, so I want to bring your attention to a number of internship opportunities we have across technology and operations. We are always, as I said, there are 3 talent programs: the RBC Internship, the RBC Amplified, and Let's Solve It, which is part of our Borealis AI brand. So if there are any graduate students or undergraduate students in the audience, please kindly connect with us if you are interested after this talk. Well, enough about RBC, so let's talk today about generative AI. And thanks to OpenAI's ChatGPT, I don't think I need to give a too thorough introduction about that. But what is generative AI? Why is it important? And what's our perspective from the financial services industry? This is the main objective of our talk today. Now, generative AI is the collection of tools, and it allows us to create content that resembles humans, what we would create. So the content can take many forms. So we know it can start from left to right, what you see on the screen. We can do text to text. Most of you are super familiar with OpenAI's ChatGPT, so I will not delve more into that content. But we can also do text to image. We can do text to audio, and also text to video. So it's interesting as well that we can also start with images as an input. We can convert one image into another one, possibly a more interesting one. We can zoom in into that meeting. We can also create from an image to a video. We can also create from an image to a 3D space, and lately, very recently, there was a very nice development from Meta called 3D image. So that's another, all these are great examples of what we are calling the Gen AI revolution. And what is interesting here is that there are at least a half dozen different technologies at bringing this generative AI revolution. Now, as we always say, this generative AI revolution was decades in the making. We all know that it all started back a decade ago when 2017, that famous transformative papers, Attention is All You Need, and how neural networks were revolutionized with deep learning by using GPUs for hardware acceleration. Now, if we fast forward to today, we can say with 100% certainty that the evolution has been exponential. And to show you that, let me talk a bit about what's the state of generative AI at present. So we know that ChatGPT shows us the value of large language models as a consumer tool, but it also shows us how that same technology can work as a developer tool. And this creates what McKinsey has termed this next productivity frontier. So we know that the impact on productivity could add trillions of dollars to the economy. We know that we're going to have a significant impact across industry. And roughly, we know that 75% of that value will be geared toward 4 different pillars: customer operations, marketing and sales, research and development, and software engineering. Now, all those 4 pillars have the potential to change the anatomy of work, and this is why it's so interesting. The generative AI field, as I said, has exploded recently. If we looked on the left-hand side, that image shows you that there has been a record $21.8 billion invested across nearly 450 deals in 2023 alone. And this is a 4 times increase in deal value from a year later. If we were to double click, as they say, on 2024, we would know that we have reached a new high with roughly 28% of all venture capital dollars going to AI startups. For Q2 alone, in 2024, we know that AI startups have captured 1/3 of all VC funding. On the picture on the right-hand side, I wanted to show you a study that was published in September that highlights why it's so important this next generation of AI technology. And this is a study that examines the performance implications of AI on realistic, complex, and knowledge-intensive tasks. So the study was done by selecting 18 different tasks, roughly 800 consultants in 3 groups. And they were randomized in a way where some consultants will be working with no AI to do those 18 tasks that I mentioned earlier. The second group will have access to GPT-4 alone. And the third group will have access to GPT-4, but would be given an introductory class on how to use GPT-4 with some basic prompt engineering. What we learned was that consultants using AI were able to complete 12.2% more tasks on average. We also learned that the tasks were completed with 25.1% more quickly, and they were produced with significantly higher quality results, approximately 40% higher quality compared to the control group. The main learning here is that AI is working as a skill leveler. So it's starting to augment, and we see that in another studies as well, the consultants who scored the worst when they were assessed again were the ones who have gained the biggest jump in their performance. So what we are seeing here is that AI is starting to help us augment the work we do. It's not a replacement. People have talked about the jagged frontier. There are things you can do very easily with machines, and there are things that you cannot do so easily with machines, for which a human may be required. Now, to say the things that have happened very quickly is an understatement. I love this quote because even though it's from September 2023, it's still very accurate today. We thought that it would become a super profound platform shift, but no one expected the firestorm of development that we have seen in the last couple of years. Now, to prove this point, I asked my team to build a timeline. And we started building this timeline when ChatGPT got released back in November 2023. And this is the first from November to September alone. This is the first year. Every single dot that you see in this timeline is significant development. So we wanted to do this to be able to communicate with our technology and business partners across the organization to show them what we were seeing. And we are using a star just to highlight those super significant milestones that we are seeing. And it's interesting because in all my 25 years old career, I had never seen so many developments hitting so soon from each other. Now, let me show you. This continues. And all the way to today. So we have over 500 data points, and as I said, each of these is significant. So all the way from now, we heard that there are state-of-the-art product innovations being done, some of which are being shown here. And we know that up to now, we have seen 7 major technological revolutions in human history. So the first one would be fire, agriculture, the wheel, the printing press, repeatable manufacturing, electricity, and of course, the internet. Alongside each of these major technological revolutions, there is a product behind that is really driving change. And what we see now is that artificial intelligence is poised to become another major transformative technology for our lives, right after the internet. But know that technology doesn't drive revolutions, products do. And we yet do not know which those products will be. I always say that in hindsight, it's super easy to connect the dots and know that with the internet, we would have Facebook and all the social revolution. But in reality, when the internet started, we had no clue what would happen. I feel we are kind of in the same situation right now. We tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short term, but underestimate the effect in the long run. And this is known today as Amara's law. We are excited about the potential of generative AI, so I wanted to talk a bit briefly about some of the use cases we are seeing in the financial services industry. What we have done here at RBC is we have established a development framework that ensures that all our uses of AI respects diversity and human integrity, and they're also aligned to consider how we are doing that for our customers and, of course, for our colleagues. So we want to bring AI into market by following a safety-first principle. Now, the generative AI use cases for a large global bank are exciting, and I'm sure I'm not going to be the first one to tell you about the use cases. They are the same use cases pretty much all the way across the industries, all the way from coding to productivity improvements, benefiting various back office operations. At RBC, we have a super rich pipeline of proof of concepts that are going to become products very soon. And we do that to realize operational efficiencies, to drive shareholder value, and of course, to create new client offerings. Some potential use cases will include improving the productivity of our coders, just on software developer side, on the software development side, helping advice-centered employees have better answers when having questions or to expedite the issue resolution, and of course, trying to reduce the customer acquisition costs through improved learning and recommendations. Now, I like this graph from Gartner because it shows us there are these 3 stages, right? Where you start doing your exploration to defend and to do task-specific improvements, and then you start moving the ladder into extending into an existing process for differentiation, a line of business, all the way for creating new products that is going to upend the industry. And I would say we are somehow in the middle. We haven't reached that later stage that we see here. Of course, everyone is talking about chatting with your data, and kudos to the first one that blurs out from where this image is. Robert's Library, great, fantastic, thank you. So I love this picture. So for you may have heard, I grew up at U of T. I spent almost 15 years of my career there. So that was one of my favorite places to hang out, the Robert's Library. So chatting with data has become almost the killer use case, although I'm not so sure yet about that one. But it is an important use case that we see across industry, not just on financial sectors. Another one interesting is knowing this knowledge assistant revolution. And we have seen how we can start interacting with multimodal data and this ability to chat with your data and at the same time for having a system that behind the scenes is able to create code that can be executed to doing basic data science and analytics without the end user having to write a single line of code, just using English as a way of interacting. And the next use case that we think is going to have a dramatic impact on the industry is going to be anything that has to do with agentic systems. This is what is going to allow us to go all the way from autonomous agents, which are a bit cartoonish in the picture that I have here, but nonetheless super interesting of how we're going to take that work all the way to workflow automation. Now, this talk begins now, because there is a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And here my colleague John will help us reflect on some important lessons we have learned along the way. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Patricia, for the kind intro and for that introduction to the space as a whole. So as a little bit of background before we jump right into lessons, is we've spent a lot of time working on proof of concepts over the last couple of years and getting things on the path to production. So that's kind of what is informing these as we go along. So to kick things off, probably not a huge surprise here, but use case, use case, use case. At this stage, that is really the driving factor for when we look at how we can apply generative AI within RBC. When we talk to business stakeholders, there's often a desire to have generalized solutions that have broad horizontal impact. And that's very, very exciting. But we've found at this stage, our greatest successes have come when we have zeroed in on a specific use case with quite a tight focus. The technology is at a point where if you identify the right problem, it is well suited to solve those. So let's take, for example, the most common use case we've been presented with, the basic chat with your data that Patricia mentioned through retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. I don't know about everyone in the audience, but at RBC, we've got a ton of data. It's in a lot of different places. There's variations across different areas of the business. You might have different formats. You might have some PDFs follow specific guidelines, some follow different. We are at a point where we can build very powerful applications, but we do need to be mindful of the data coming in and kind of tailor our approaches to match that. Maybe we're thinking about the way we approach chunkings and embeddings in order to make sure we match up with what our input data looks like. The important thing here is it is a moment where you can drive great change, but you've got to really know what you're zeroing in on, and you've really got to not try and just take that one-size-fits-all approach, because that will get you part of the way on a proof of concept, but if you actually want to get something into production, you've really got to zero in on the specific task you're looking to solve. Now, this is also true on the model side. So I kind of love this graph from AWS. Early on, probably like a lot of people in this room, we were pretty exclusively experimenting with GPT-4, 4 Turbo, recently 4.0, kind of the APIs as a way of building out our proof of concepts. But oftentimes there's a Goldilocks match between model and use case. Beyond the point of good enough, you're likely overpaying for limited additional value. So there's often a sweet spot for the model. And you've got to take into account that different models have different trade-offs. It can be cost, latency, data privacy, or the ability to customize. It's important to kind of take that step back, look at your use case, and figure out what is the model that is best suited to that. It's not always going to be GPT-4 Turbo or 4.0. And especially within financial services, data privacy is understandably a huge consideration. So we've actually found with some of our more recent POCs is we're gravitating more and more towards open source models in some cases for specific applications, because it gives us greater customization and flexibility over where we host things and how we control the flow of data from our application through to the model and the output back. Now, the problems themselves. The number of times we've been approached by very excited people in the business that want to use generative AI, but don't actually have a generative AI problem is not insignificant. It could be that they have something that is actually a more traditional machine learning task. We did have one call where I remember after we hung up, turning to somebody's IP being like, I'm pretty sure what they want is a regular expression. It's a bit of a hype cycle right now. Everybody wants to be working with generative AI, and they want to have that initiative. But if you don't take that step back at the beginning of the project, look at the use case, and figure out whether generative AI really is the right tool set for this, it's going to come back and bite you down the line. So it's really important to take that moment, take the breath, and figure out really whether it is the right solution. As Patricia mentioned with use cases, you really got to focus on ones that deliver quantifiable value. You can't just be experimenting it out for the sake of it. You want to maybe automate routine tasks, personalize experiences. And when trying to identify things, I really like this example that was said by somebody at Microsoft once over a presentation, is like some of the giveaways are in the name itself. Generative AI, look for things where you're generating content. Large language models, look for language-specific tasks. Some of those hints already exist, and it's just you've got to be aware when you're looking at problems and match them up. My lovely graphic on the right, also take a look at the underlying business process. In a lot of cases, generative AI might be a Band-Aid that can solve a problem with a business process, but if that business process is fundamentally flawed, you're just kicking the technical debt or the business process debt, you're kicking it down the road. So it is a good opportunity when you're identifying these to, again, take that moment to breathe, take a look at the problem and understand whether you're just band-aiding a solution and you're adding on a bunch of additional cost and GPU inference in order to solve something that could actually be solved further up the chain and make for a cleaner solution at the end of the day. Now, maybe it's my HCI background, but I'm very partial to this one, admittedly. As most of the world has become familiarized with generative AI through ChatGPT, chat is often presented as if it's the be-all and end-all of the way of interacting with these systems. I'm here to tell you that doesn't have to be the case. Again, think of your use case. As we all know, language is not a perfect means of communication. It is a very ambiguous input. I know myself, and probably everybody in this room, has misinterpreted their fair share of Slack communications. Models are no different. Think about your use case and pick the UI that is going to match that perfectly, or not perfectly, but as best as possible. And it is always worth the time to engage a UX expert and a subject matter expert for your use case. This allows you to step through the mental model of people who are already approaching these problems. Within the organization, like at RBC, generally when we're approaching a problem, there's an existing process in place. And the benefit we get from working with subject matter experts to step through how they approach it today is invaluable. You need to know what information they have, how do they access it, what are their pain points, what do they produce, and also what is the tooling they currently use. One basic example is even just looking at semantic search. So we have wonderful semantic search now. You can type a nice sentence into a chat box and you can get a result. But there is decades of people who have been using keyword search. There wasn't necessarily an inherent issue with keyword search. Most of us are used to navigating that way. There's no reason to necessarily toss the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and not allow for people to use the behaviors they are accustomed to. These systems work best when you pair the technology with existing behaviors in order to kind of elevate things and solve problems. You don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel every single time. You just need to improve things for people. Now, prompting. A good programmer does not necessarily equal a good prompt writer. We found that many times. We are at a strange in-between stage where the programmers are often writing the prompts, and I personally am very excited for the day when one of our business stakeholders can write their own prompts, but sadly, we're not quite at that stage yet. And as much as it's true for every other slide to this point, this is the one where I really think trying to become a subject matter expert in what your use case is becomes incredibly important. This allows you to write the best prompts you possibly can, but it also, it gets you to the level of detail where you can explain to the oftentimes surprisingly opinionated model what you are looking to accomplish. And the other side of that too is it allows you to identify where things are going wrong. If you know the output you're expecting, kind of like the back of your hand, it's easy to pick up on when things are not quite right and then identify the issue within your application flow of where things are going wrong. And you can't really do that unless you understand your use case very, very well. One other quick example, I know I'm getting a little bit low on time, but we are working with POC where we're taking in a bunch of numerical information and we're trying to create some text from it. Without fail, anytime we presented GPT-4 with a negative number, it automatically assumed something bad must have happened. As much as we tried to coax it, I'm yelling at it in capitals and it just doesn't get it. Negative number, bad news. But because we knew the use case, we were able to actually write helper functions that took those numerical values, 4 of them, and translate them into a natural language sentence that we could then pass to the prompt. And from there, we were able to get the generation we were looking for. But that wouldn't have been possible unless we had really taken the time to get deep in the use case and understand how the current people within the bank were interpreting these numbers, and then use that as our guiding star to work through the problems as we came up with them. Now, data. So I know I am saying here there's no data like more data, but I'm going to qualify what I mean by more, because it's not necessarily a quantity issue. It is about variety of data, and it is about quality of data. It's a common saying in AI that machine learning is 80% data and 20% models, but in practice, the vast majority of effort from both researchers and practitioners is really concentrating on the model part rather than the data at this point in time. Not shockingly, pretty much every application we have built at RBC with our team is heavily reliant on internal data. The importance is huge, and that's probably not a shocker to anybody in this room. Even the projects where we don't think we are depending on internal data, there's often an inflection point where it turns out, actually, we need more internal data. Maybe it's because we need to fine-tune something and get the output, maybe that extra 10% on the path to production. But you need to have a data plan and be able to, when you're talking with your business stakeholders, communicate what you need and ensure that as practitioners, you should be communicating the importance of this data to the organization, making sure it is a priority, that the quality and, very importantly, the distribution is there in order to get it and use it within this tooling. Within that, also, synthetic data. By 2030, Gartner predicts the majority of AI initiatives will be powered by synthetic data. Generated synthetic data is already in use for training autonomous vehicles, robotics, and we find for us within financial services, data privacy is obviously incredibly important. It always has been. But as we're looking to evaluate models, maybe fine-tune, synthetic data helps us address some of the concerns around data privacy, because we can create synthetic data that is close enough to true data to allow us to move our application along and evaluate it while alleviating some of those concerns. Additionally, it can be very useful for getting a POC off the ground. If you're trying to build something where you need to create a data set for maybe the initial evaluation to make sure you're on the right track, let's say you need to comb through hours of transcripts in order to extract information. Synthetic data can be a very useful tool for kind of getting things going on that sense. I will end that, though, by saying there's no substitution for ground truth data. When you are doing final evaluation, you need to show that this is actually working the way it's intended. That is still the gold standard. Now, if 2023 was the year of the POC, 2024 is the year of production. We are a team that is mainly focused on proof of concepts, and the expectations and processes of building these applications, even for us, have changed significantly over the last year. Our group is always proof of concept, but the expectations around this stuff is very differently. This is maybe my favorite development-based GIF of all time. I've probably overused it at this point, which hopefully doesn't comment on me as an engineering lead. But the change is very pronounced. If the proof of concept, it was using the model as the focus, you're building fast, you're trying to demonstrate possibility, we're now at a point where large language models, they're often part of larger systems. Cost and latency are incredibly important. You have choice of models, but you really need to be motivated by security, privacy, compliance, and responsible and ethical AI, and not to mention, you also need to deliver tangible business value. It might be enough to have a vague concept of, yes, this can improve efficiency by some number out of the sky during the proof of concept phase, but when you're actually productizing something, at the end of the day, you need something quantifiable to show that this has impact and is worth the cost. With that in mind, how do we measure performance? I wish I could stand up here and be like, here are the metrics you need, but that's not the way this works. Again, it's determined by your use case. The graphic on the right is showing time to first token, but that might be very important for some applications, but there are others where maybe it's not time sensitive and something is running as more of a batch process in the background, and maybe it isn't. So again, you need to get back to your use case, and you need to establish what you are measuring and know that at the beginning. Do you care about latency? Maybe you're evaluating a RAG system, and you're going to use the RAGis framework to look through how that is performing. Additionally, maybe it's text generation, and you'd like to pretend that these systems are 100% accurate, but maybe you're actually measuring against a level of accuracy of 70 to 80% of the application output being usable out of the gate without editing by a human. And maybe that's your metric. The important thing is it's quantifiable. Qualitative analysis might be good enough in a POC phase, but at this stage when you're productizing, you need hard numbers. With that in mind, you also need to work with your business sponsors to make sure they have hard numbers to compare against. If you're going to demonstrate that you're saving a bunch of time, you need to have the hours, you need that number. A number in a vacuum really is no good. Now, guardrails. So this is a quote on the left. I asked Llama 7B to give me a good quote from a popular movie about guardrails, and this is what I got back. I read it once, I thought this is perfect. It's going immediately in the slide deck. When I read it again, and thought maybe this is a little bit too perfect. And turns out that quote is not in the movie. So I thought I would leave it in the deck anyway to illustrate the point. These models are not perfect, they will hallucinate, and we need to be prepared for those. You need to have guardrails within your application. Similarly on the right is you can have basic safety in place to prevent a basic text of how to build a bomb. But creative use of ASCII characters, maybe somebody can jailbreak it and get through. So you need to be aware that you need guardrails within your applications. Thankfully, frameworks are starting to show up. We have experimented with one called Trust LLM, which will allow us to benchmark the notion of trustworthiness for our systems. And that can look at things like truthfulness, which covers misinformation and hallucination, as well as safety, robustness, and fairness. An important piece here is it needs to be taken into account at the beginning. So safe and responsible AI adoption is paramount at RBC. We're trusted partners for our clients' information and assets. There's countless examples in the news about lawsuits and what happens when organizations put forward products and services that are not ready for prime time. And the same way that we can't leave testing until the end of development without running into a bunch of problems, we need the risk considerations of privacy, security, transparency, fairness, and outcomes. Those need to be accounted for at the very beginning of development. And it's on us as practitioners to internalize that. We need to find the teams responsible and work with them to make sure that our project is successful. This is still early days, as Patricia mentioned, and it's crucially important to have these conversations and learn from each other. Risk teams shouldn't necessarily have to operate in a vacuum, and development teams shouldn't either. We need to get the best outcomes by working together with these applications to make sure they're following the principles of responsible AI. And with that, I will pass it back to Patricia.
Great. So one more slide. So we know, I don't know if people that know me, but I love period pieces, and I love ending a talk with a nice image. Of course, courtesy of DALL-E. And maybe I'm captivated by this picture because, I don't know, I do not know how to elegantly dance, so that's not definitely would not be me. But maybe because I do expect the next generation of AI technology that would adapt to us as much as we adapt to that technology. So I believe we do have altogether the power to shape this dance the way we want it. So people are arguing that the next wave of AI is less about a particular technology like generative AI, but more about that step change in that technology revolution, what I spoke earlier on the talk. So this is more about what the technology can do for us and what the technology can enable us to do. So it is not how we interact with machines, right, through clicks, through touches. It's more how we can use our human language to create this revolution from generative AI to interactive AI. So here at RBC, we are super excited about the future. And we invite you, the new generation of Canadian AI leaders, to join us in this exciting adventure. Thank you.